Okay, so when we were talking about what we were going to talk about, you had said you've recently started using ancestry.com and you had an interesting discovery. So I thought I would let you share that story and then maybe we can just talk around that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so it kind of ties back into the South Downs hike that my husband did in England, where we started in Eastbourne. My great grandfather on my mother's side, he was from England, and he had he had other family who actually, I think his father, so my great great grandfather, lived in Eastbourne, and uh, one person was an artist there, so taught at this art school. I had this book of his, How to Draw Hands. So anyway, it was cool to be in Eastbourne and with this connection of this English family. But it turns out that through DNA, I discovered, oh, I guess my great grandfather is not actually my great grandfather because all of that side is English Protestant, and it turns out apparently my biological great grandfather is Irish Catholic man from Philadelphia. So it's like, who knew? And we knew that there were definitely untold stories because my great grandma, she lived to be 100. So she was born in 1889 and she lived to uh, 1989. And my mother was always told she was the only granddaughter. And my great grandfather, he had died in 1949. So my great grandma, had this whole life after he passed away. But because my great grandma and grandpa, they just had the one son, my mother's father, it came as a total shock in 1989 to my mother to find out no, she's not the only granddaughter. There's another granddaughter, her first cousin, who lives, or was from the East Coast. It's like, well, how could that happen? Because it was just my mom's dad. Well, apparently, my grandma and grandpa had two children. The first little girl, dear Myrtle, she was born in 1909. And yet, we look at the census, and in 1910, my great grandfather was married to somebody else. So, how did he have this, in 1910 married to somebody else, but in 1909, before that, he and great grandma had already had a baby. So, I don't things happen. So, a few years later, then they have my mom's dad in 1912.
Okay.
So, come to find out, this his older sister, which no one knew about because the family moved from Philadelphia to Santa Monica, California in 1917. And they only brought their son with them. They left their little girl, Myrtle, at home to be raised by her grandparents. And it's like, this is just all so strange. So, our California side, we all think it's only the one boy and only my mother. But then turns out Minnie had this whole other family on the East Coast. Her daughter, who stayed behind to be raised with my great grandma Minnie's parents. And then, so this daughter had my mom's cousin Carol. So all this comes out. So when I do the DNA test, Carol and I connect and talk to each other on the phone. And she's a wonderful woman. Have this lovely conversation for like an hour, and she shares with me like, here's her mom's birth certificate and everything. So I suppose partly because whatever happened must have been out of wedlock. They had it all documented through the church right away that this English man with the family in Eastbourne, that was the father. But we always kind of wondered, well, maybe, but anyway, because they had a second kid, we thought, well, surely their second kid, my mom's father, must be legitimate. But so we do this DNA testing, and Carol and I are, of course, connected because we have great grandma Minnie in common. But and she connects with this other English woman whose family was in Eastbourne. She connects through DNA with this cousin who's now in Scotland. So Glenn and I end up traveling to Scotland, go meet this cousin outside of Oban. She has us over to dinner on her farm. Lovely evening and everything. But we share our DNA. She pulls it up on the computer. We have no common matches. It's like, oh my gosh, we're not family. You just fed me, served me your elderberry gin that you made, and we're not actually family. But she said, I still get to be family. I mean, that she would be the family that is on the tree that we know that my great grandma tried so hard to cover up for 100 years, right? That, uh, yeah, something must have happened. So also through the DNA, I see that, gee, why do I have all this Irish blood in me? 17%. It always fluctuates with uh, ancestry. They refine things. But today I have 17% supposedly.
Okay.
But cousin Carol, she's got no Irish blood in her. And then my mom has a half brother. Um, he's got no Irish blood. So the Irish blood didn't come from her mom. It must have come from her dad's side. I mean, 0%. And cousin Carol, 0%. So anyway, through different DNA connections, and then I messaged some of my DNA matches and said, hey, can you tell me about your family, or do you know what your connection is with these other people? I was able to go through and look at census and see where this Irish Catholic family had all been congregating right around the corner from great grandma Minnie. I mean, literally, like right around the corner. So I'm thinking, okay. And it was kind of hard to narrow down because they've all got like 10 kids, but I just based on kind of ages, and not all the kids lived long enough. They had to be alive in 1911 for her to have a baby in 1912. But anyway, so it all points to, apparently I have no connection with England and Eastbourne, where Samuel Pullman or Oliver Sr. Uh, was an artist, apparently. Got Irish Catholic blood in me. So it's all been a revelation. So it kind of remains a mystery. I don't know exactly, but I'll go through and see, is there anyone new? I've chatted with a few people. One man who's younger than me, he's like, well, I'll talk to my mom. My mom remembers things and, knows more people, and he talked to her. And so that's been sort of interesting to find out more about this family. But I guess I'll never know exactly how I'm connected. But I do know that my English great grandma's or grandpa was not actually my blood great grandpa. So just kind of interesting. But I still made some nice connections. And cousin Jill in Oban, Scotland, says I get to keep her, so I'm keeping her.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's wild. It sounds like there must have been some situation, something scandalous going on with your grandfather's mom, because
Yes.
so she has her first daughter, but not with her. Was it with? Do we know if it's with her husband? It was with her husband
We know it was with her husband
because
because
he's the
cousin
English.
Carol's connected to cousin Jill in Scotland,
So
who's
then,
definitely from that English line.
Okay, so we know your great grandmother has a daughter and it's with her husband, and then she has your grandfather, but it's not with her husband.
Three
Does
years
her,
later, right?
yeah, so maybe that's why she moved, but do you have any suspicions if, like, her husband thought that the son wasn't his? Or do you,
No, I'm sure that he thought that he was because um, just of because of the way that he talked, and I have actually through cousin Carol, had a copy of the eulogy that my mom's dad gave for his dad in 1949, and um, talking about how he was always like his pride and joy and blah blah blah. So no, he very much, I believe, thought that he was the father of
did
my
you know
mom's
your
dad.
grandfather well? Like, do you remember?
I didn't, because my my mom's parents actually got divorced when she was little. She was like 2. So I don't ever even remember meeting my mom's biological father. I know I did. And even though he was alive up until 1980, I didn't have a relationship with him. And uh, his mom, my great grandma Minnie, scandalous, but she must have been oh so fun, Minnie. She, like I said, was alive until 1989, so I was 30, and I don't recall meeting her other than as a little kid. Somebody had a mynah bird, Minnie with the mynah bird, so we'd go and visit her. But I don't remember her, and she wasn't in my life as I was growing up.
Well, wouldn't it just be amazing to, like, be able to ask Minnie about this? Because
Oh, I know. So that's the thing. Carol and I, my mom's first cousin Carol, she and I were talking, and uh, her mom had uh, died from cancer, unfortunately. So she passed before her natural time. But so she's like, oh, my mom's best friend. I'm sure she knew all this, but you know, it wasn't until the DNA came out that anybody had any kind of inkling of this. Well, my mom first got the inkling that gee, something was up just because she found out she had this first cousin that she didn't know anything about. Um, so, yeah, I wish I could talk to Minnie, and how tragic that you feel like you have to have this deep secret. But Minnie would go and visit her daughter, and so cousin Carol knew Minnie. She would come, and it was it was no secret. But on some of the census and the earlier census, it I wonder if maybe Minnie was trying to pass off her daughter as, say, a younger sister. So like, is that why she stayed behind and was raised by the grandparents? Because maybe the little girl thought the grandparents were her parents, and that would be traumatic to be torn away from the people you think are your parents. So who knows? But it does make me glad to be living in a time when you go, yep, I had a child out of wedlock. How about that? So,
well,
and not have to not have it be some shameful thing.
sure, no, and I don't have any shame in my mind about it.
Yeah, yeah,
I just am so confused about why would you leave your non like your child that you have in wedlock behind and take the son that is out of wedlock?
right, right,
It just seems confusing. And I'd be curious, like, did the biological father know that he had this son? And because it seems like Minnie took the son and left with
right,
the husband and didn't tell her husband and maybe didn't tell the biological father. No one knew,
right.
it seems like.
No one knew. Yeah, part of me wonders, gee, did this little boy look like the spitting image of his Irish Catholic father who lived around the corner? So they needed to leave Dodge, get out of town, and take this little boy. And like I said, but yeah, but why did they leave the little girl behind? And yet it seemed like my great grandpa, I although he's on the birth certificate, I wonder if he didn't believe or he had doubts, if maybe he didn't think the little girl was really his. Or maybe he did and he did it out of love, thinking, the best thing for the little girl is to stay behind with her grandparents. But it's very, very odd.
And it sounds like when you said Minnie went back to visit, like at first I thought, well, maybe it was a long time ago. Maybe they thought, well, it'll be temporary. I'll come back and get her, or I don't know how they were traveling back then. I mean, that was probably a long journey.
Right. That could be. And yet the weird thing is that, so although my mom's parents weren't married very long, um, I think that they grew up in kind of the same community. They probably went to high school together. So she knew of she knew about her husband's background. So my mom asked her mom, "Hey, did my dad know he had a sister?" No, he didn't have a sister. It's like so nobody knew. So I don't think that's why I'm thinking that somehow they lived this life where they kind of rewrote history. And
But so if he didn't know
my
that,
dad grew up thinking, or I mean, my mom's dad, Alva, he grew up thinking he was an only child.
yeah. So that sounds like Minnie was going back to visit her daughter and not even telling anybody that she was doing that.
Right. And I don't know when she went back, like how often. And of course, her husband, Minnie's husband, died in 1949. So, maybe it wasn't until after that that she
Okay.
started going back or so. I don't know. Yeah, it's all one great big mystery. So I have my own little theories. I've written this whole novel inside of my head that may or may not be true, right?
And you said you've reached out to some of the Irish Catholic family members to say, I think we're related.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's out there on DNA. We're related. So I was just saying, hey, do you know how you're related to this other person because you're both, and those people outside of my immediate family, like my uncle, my nephew and niece, it's those Irish Catholic people who are my closest DNA matches. So that's what's kind of interesting too. Um, they come up showing like as maybe a second or third cousin. They're they're even closer in my match than my mom's cousin Carol.
Hmm.
So um, I I don't know. So I mean I did start out by, hey, I think my grandma had an affair with your great uncle. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah.
But hey, I'm just trying to understand how I might be connected. So um, yeah, it's
When I did
like
get
I
a
said,
chance
it's
to
all
go to
mystery.
Ireland, I forgot to talk. When I went to France, we
Yeah.
did like a week in Ireland, and I
Oh wow.
remember um, the people that we met in Ireland like talked about the kind of rivalry with England.
Oh
So
yeah.
it kind of just adds a little bit to the story too. That um, the Irish and the English sort of thing.
Right. Right. I've never been to Ireland or Northern Ireland. So one of these days, usually I'm trying to think of where can I go where there's sun. So if I want to be under gray skies and rain, I may as well stay in Portland. But no, one of these days I would like to go to Ireland. I hear it's a great trip and people are so friendly.
Yeah, I did think they were, and they mostly speak English, so that makes it a little easier.
Right? So you can
um,
understand them even through whatever kind of uh,
accent they
the
have.
accent. Yeah.
Um, Anything else interesting about ancestry? Like you were talking about, you learned some traits about yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Do you believe that kind of stuff?
Well,
It could be true.
um,
I have no, I don't have any clue.
you know, I have to say that a lot of the traits on there actually did fit me pretty well. So some
Yeah,
of the things like, oh, gee, you probably have fine hair or blue eyes. Well, okay, that seems more like something that would just be straight up, DNA that you learn in your high school biology class or something. But then some of the things are, oh, you're probably not very good at sports. So hit that one on the head. I am not very coordinated, that eye-hand coordination. So to try to hit a softball or put the basket in the hoop, nope, not my strong point. Yeah, it did. Which said I was night owl. Okay, bingo.
yeah,
I am a night owl. One of the things that it said, and it said I got this from my father, and maybe I just misunderstood how it was meant, but it said something about not being very determined. And it's like, oh, no, that is not right. My father was like the core epitome of determination. And I feel like I am too, sort of like, yeah, I'll I'll be determined to get the lowest airfare flight. I am going to search this and not give up.
yeah,
So, or if it was at work, I was like, I'm going to solve this problem. But um, so maybe they meant it in a different way. Maybe they meant it more like, oh, you're not very ambitious in terms of making a whole lot of money or, getting ahead that way or something, which I've always felt a lot of pride in my work and want to do it really well. But I never really went after it like, okay, I've got to try to find the highest paying job and this is where I want to be in 5 years. I was just like, oh, great, I have a job. Oh, good. I'm happy at it today. And okay, some nebulous, like, yes, I want to keep advancing, but it wasn't. Some people come in, here's my plan, here's my 5 year plan, my 10-year plan, and they make it happen. So that definitely wasn't me. So maybe it meant it that way. But at any rate, a lot of the traits were definitely felt like they resonated.
okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I've been scared to do it because, um, I don't know. Do you ever you said you knew somebody that is like will not give their DNA? Um,
Yeah, my husband doesn't want to do it. My
oh
father
yeah,
said he would do it, and I sent him a kit, and then he's like, "Oh, no." And I don't know if it's true or not. My stepmom told me, "Oh, he just doesn't want it to come out in case he had a kid out of wedlock or something." It's like, well, Dad, if that were true, that's going to come out anyway because there's going to be some top match for me. Gee, you have a half brother, and in fact, I do have half siblings because my dad remarried and had a second family. So it's like, no, they're going to be up at the top. So it doesn't matter what you do, Dad. But
okay, but how does it know? Like, what if that person didn't do it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what if the person that is the other family, they haven't done the DNA test, so they wouldn't show up either, right?
well, so like my my half brother did the DNA test, so I'm connected to him. And in fact, it even shows me who's on my mother's side and who's on my father's side. So I guess they can just tell by the chromosomes we have in common or something um, that he's my half brother through my father. But yes, he'd have to do the DNA test for me to do that. But that's why I'm saying, like, okay, Dad, you don't have to do the DNA test. If your supposed child did the DNA test, then cat's out of the bag.
I do feel like that's there's always a fear of the unknown, you know? It's like I saw something that somebody did it and it like provided the necessary DNA and then they were arrested for a crime that
Oh,
they had
right,
done, you know, like they really did
right,
do it.
right.
And I don't have any crimes that I'm like worried about coming to light, but
Sure.
at the same time I'm just like I don't need to find out anything, you know. I don't need any bad things to come up, you know. So
Right.
I
I
don't know. I
could,
hadn't even thought about the kid outside of wedlock, but that sounds terrifying. Like all of a sudden if you found that out, you know?
yep, yep. It happens, but
Yeah.
brave new world. Like I said, the great grandma trying to bury and successfully burying something for, you know,
Yeah, I
80
mean like
years, her entire adult life. And then, oh, here we go. With a simple
and
little spit swab. Guess what,
yeah,
Grandma?
it's come to light, yeah. And you know, I think you discovered it recently, so she'd already passed away, but um I don't know, like I'm sure you think a little bit differently about her and it's not like probably not in a bad way at all, but
Right,
still
right.
like I don't know.
Well, and I also found out, so my dad, what got me started in ancestry in the first place was actually to try to um, research my French Canadian history. So I too might be able to have a friend who's from France, but sadly, I haven't even met a friend who's from uh, Quebec area. But I did actually meet one of my dad's cousins, second cousin. I forget if his first cousin once removed. Anyway, what I found out through um, and actually, this wasn't even DNA, this was just researching records on Ancestry and actually writing to a hospital in Boston for some birth records or something, or the city. But my dad's father was one of five siblings, and my dad knew about his two aunts, but he didn't know that he had two uncles as well. There was because my uh, grandfather on my dad's side, this French Canadian Catholic, had the audacity to marry my Protestant grandmother. So that was it, you know, all ties cut. We don't want anything of that heathen woman. So basically, my grandfather did not have a relationship anymore with his mother, I don't think. But so one of his, one of these, well, it was actually from one of the aunts. So it was interesting to find out that my dad had uncles and I've done some research on that. But one of the aunts had a son. And then so I was able to meet, you know, one of my dad's cousins through this aunt's offspring. And he came out to Portland from New York. And so we went and had dinner together with my husband. And that was a lot of fun to be able to meet him. And since then, he's done the DNA test. And now it's like he's kind of part of this, our bigger uh, family where we'll write occasionally. He's Facebook friends with my stepmom, so she's not even related to him, you know. But anyway, so it has created some very nice connections.
Oh yeah. I'm sure you learn like a very surprising number of people that are distantly connected, but then you just figure out it's a small world and you
Hmm.
do have something in common with, so it's fun. I really love the story where you actually went to England and met the people and then you know it turns out you weren't related, but
Yeah.
like you kind of are still related
Right,
in a
we are
way.
in terms of that family history that we
Yeah.
grew up with, thinking this is who we are. So very much so.
That
She
had to have
can't.
been kind of a laugh like when you were there in person realizing right in the moment.
Right, we kind of suspected it, but yeah, once. once we could pull up her account and my account side by side and see who we had matches with, and we had zero common matches, it's like, oh, darn it.